They say you can always go home, but for Kirby, the return wasn't that simple. In fact, it's a trip that began 11 years ago as a GameCube follow-up to a Nintendo 64 game, but that road was a bit bumpier than anticipated. One proverbial flat tire led to empty tanks of gas, busted headlights, and eventually the entire car just bursting into flames. This game had so many confirmations, repudiations, demonstrations, and cancellations, it seemed like Kirby would never get back home. But after 11 years and 3 separate trips to the drawing board, it's here. The Nintendo equivalent to Chinese democracy has finally been unleashed. In all its pink and fluffy glory, it's Kirby's Return to Dreamland, and it's about time. Of course, in a sense, Kirby couldn't have picked a worse time. Released this week exclusively for the Nintendo Wii, Kirby's Return to Dreamland is only like the 3rd game Nintendo's published on its own console this year. Needless to say, a desperate fan base can also be a cranky fan base, and especially in the wake of the fantastic, epic yarn, starved Wii owners have very high hopes for Return to Dreamland. Unfortunately, this is more a hearty dinner than a 5-star meal. This is not the best Kirby game of all time. Hell, this isn't even the best Kirby game on Wii. But despite its tumultuous history and the fabric shadow looming over it, it's still a return worth celebrating. Return to Dreamland takes Kirby back to his roots. Gone is the yarn whip and the Kirby clusters that have defined his recent adventures, and in their place is the Puffball's most trusted weapon, his appetite. This is a Kirby release in the vein of the classics, mixing traditional 2D platforming with the ability to inhale enemies and absorb their abilities. And in that respect, Kirby is better than ever in Return to Dreamland. Old favorites like the Cutter, Fire, and Beam are all here, as well as a slew of new abilities. In fact, Kirby can even absorb super abilities, which are like the Kirby equivalent to Mario's Mega Mushroom, allowing him to reach massive sizes and massive damage. Speaking of Mario, this game is exceedingly familiar to play. It feels right at home alongside games like New Super Mario Bros. And Donkey Kong Country Returns in terms of its gameplay and design, perhaps best described as modern retro. Those games take a new look at old ideas, and Return to Dreamland does the same. Of course, the trade-off is in originality. Nintendo has flexed more creative muscle with the Kirby series than perhaps any other in recent years. The Mass Attack game for Nintendo DS, and especially Kirby's Epic Yarn, are definitely old school in approach, but they use that as a platform for serious creativity. Return to Dreamland does not. Super abilities are a nice touch, and some of the stages are clearly influenced by the Mario Galaxy titles, but the ratio of old and new feels like it's leaning to the former in Return to Dreamland, whereas in Nintendo's very best modern retro platformers, it's leaning to the latter. But again, the flaw is only in contrast. On its own, this is a very good platformer with plenty of content and gameplay. There are 120 energy spheres hidden throughout the game, not to mention challenge rooms, surprisingly robust mini-games to unlock, and a 4-player multiplayer mode in which Kirby and King DDD finally join forces. I never thought I'd live to see the day. Of course, I never thought I'd live to see this game either, but has it been worth the wait? Well, that depends. If you're expecting another bold, creative Kirby game, you might be disappointed, but if you're interested in revisiting your roots, Kirby's Return to Dreamland is a trip worth taking and a refreshing sip of quality for a very parched system.